Welcome back, guys. It is Lite Crypto here at it again, and today we're going to be doing something more different from the usual. We're going to be measuring what exactly is going to be the cheapest blockchain to use by user perspective. Now, obviously, I could have tested out hundreds of different blockchains, but in order to avoid that, I decided to add 5 criteria that have to be met in order to get listed in this video. Number 1 being the chain has to have smart contract support. This is essential as smart contracts take a lot more gas, they have a lot more data in them, and they are a lot more complex. It would be a false equivalency to basically compare a chain that doesn't have them into something that has. Number 2 criteria is the coin has to be in top 250 by coin market cap. We can't include absolutely every unknown coin out there. Number 3, there has to be over 100,000 transactions per day. It cannot be a dead chain. Just because the market cap is very high, it doesn't mean that there's a lot of activity going on that chain. Case in point, Internet Computer. Number 4, it has to be more than 3 months old project, and this is kind of essential as there's like honeymoon phases where there's a lot of activity on the chain. It kind of has to survive through the test of time. And lastly, and more importantly, no secondary gas coin chain. So things like Neo, VeChain, EOS kind of work in a very different capacity and a different way, so they kind of be really compared and measured in the same way as we are doing the rest of the coins in this list. But all these things considered, I was able to basically find out 30 coins which we're going to be comparing in 2 different criterias. Number 1 is transfer cost of a token on that chain, and then we have swap cost inside a DEX. We could have included an NFT stuff, but those are not very universal, and it would have taken so much time to basically find out how to deploy NFTs on every single chain of these. But let's get actually started with the list. Now, it probably doesn't come to anybody's surprise that the most expensive chain is Ethereum. Transfer cost sitting at $1.79, swap cost sitting at $12.38. But it needs to be said that the Ethereum's gas fees do fluctuate quite wildly throughout the day, unlike any other chain out there. So at certain hours of the day, you might even get 60 to 70% lower gas fees than on the actual rush hours. So that is something that you should bear in mind. At number 29, we have maybe an entry that people didn't expect, and that is Tron. Now, there's a couple of caveats here which are interesting. Number 1 is that it has $2.17 transfer cost, making it the highest on this whole list, while the swap cost is $1.28. So when it comes to EVM design, a lot of the other chains, swaps usually always cost more than the transfers, but Tron is a reverse in their design on this. Now, Tron does have this staking system which gives you energy and bandwidth, which allows you to do more transactions technically for free, but I think you need to have like 400 to 500 Tron in dollars to basically staked out in order to get like a 1 free transaction per day. So those costs are very, very high. Tron used to be extremely cheap back in the day, but they kind of changed the design with the burning and everything. At 28, we have Cardano, the favorite chain of the soy jacks. And I mean, they always keep saying to me on Twitter that, hey, this is a very affordable chain to use, but it really isn't. So the transfer costs are sitting at $1.33. Pay in mind that it's a bit cheaper actually when you do transfer ADA, because there's an actual additional fee attached when you're sending any other asset, whether it's an NFT or another token under Cardano's chain. But nonetheless, it is actually quite expensive to send them. Now, when it comes to swapping, it's actually a lot more affordable, but it's still at 51 cents, which is definitely not, low-income traders' paradise when we think about it. So Cardano is definitely another chain that has very, very expensive costs. Now, at 27, we have Arbitrum, and now we're significantly making drops in actual fees. So the transfer costs are sitting at 0.016, so that is almost 2 cents, which is very affordable. But then we have the swap cost, which is sitting at 21.5 cents, which is significantly higher compared to the actual transfer. Arbitrum, once again, was another of those chains which used to be a lot more affordable back in the day, but I think it has kind of gone up in prices and no longer very competitive entry to the Optimism stack, for example. Then at 26, we have Ton with numbers of 0.1 and 0.17. What makes this interesting is that Toncoin has actually a flat fee attached to these transfers. So even though there's less traffic going on the chain, the fee is going to be staying the same relative to actual Ton price. So as the price of Ton goes up, it's going to be also showing on the actual transfer and swap costs. Then at 25, we have Solana, which probably a lot of people didn't expect. They probably thinking, oh, Solana is going to be at very, very low on this list. And if it was to the transfer cost, it probably would be, as Solana is 0.00086, but their swap costs are very expensive. So when you're actually interacting with NFTs or any type of tokens, it's actually going to be expensive, as they have to create a reserve for every single asset that basically exists inside the chain, and that is creating this very, very high swap costs and other types of smart contract transactions on the chain, while the actual transfers themselves are very, very cheap. At 24, we have Multiverse X, known as Elrond before. Pretty low numbers with, once again, kind of similar thing here, where the transfers are kind of cheap, but when it comes to swap costs, it actually gets significantly higher contrasted into the transfers. Then we have Mantle, which is one of these other EVM chains, which is also quite cheap to use. At 22, we have Starknet. Not much to say here, except that these numbers were tested out on Ethereum. You can actually also play in the Stark token on the chain as well, which technically could be lower on price. I'm not sure how it's basically priced out, but Starknet does have a decent actual fees in my opinion. Then we have 21 at Sonic, which is relatively at similar numbers here in terms of the transfer and swaps. It's a bit lower than Starknet. Then we have BNB at 20. They have also quite low numbers here currently. They have been higher historically, so maybe some of the activity has gone into OBBNB than the BNB chain, but these have significantly gone down compared to the older times. Then we have AVAX, which also used to be super expensive back in the day. Now it's actually quite affordable entry to trade on. Very low numbers here, again, sub 1 cent. Then we have Sui and Aptos at 18th and 17th, and these were probably also expected to be very, very low on the list. And their transfer costs are also very similar to actual swap costs. So the swap costs are identical on Sui and Aptos right now. And then on the transfer cost, Aptos is actually 2 times cheaper than Sui, but it needs to be said that Sui is probably a lot more active of a chain in terms of transactions compared to Aptos, but they're still ranking out very, very good on this list. Then we have 16th, which is Near. And Near is a bit different because they have this storage system. So it was really hard to really measure these actual numbers, because when you do transactions on a certain DEX, you might have to do a storage account for them, which is usually like 0.2 Near, if I correct. But in case if you actually do not count those in, which would be a singular, would not be for every single token you're going to be trading, Near is actually quite affordable in the both categories. Then we have Silo, which is slightly more cheaper than Near currently, and a lot more cheaper in terms of transfer costs and swap costs. At 14, we have Base, which has been incredibly cheap given to the fact that there's almost in some days like 4 million to 6 million transfers per day. So it's a very, very scalable chain, and that's why so many projects are moving into Base and starting to build there. Then we have Injective, which is one of the Cosmos chains. It's another one that has insane amount of millions of transactions happening per day, and also very competitive. It does have a higher transfer cost than Base, but it has a couple of very, very small numbers ranking above Base right now. Then we have another EVM fork here with Core. Managed to have a lot more lower transactions, but then again, this is a bit less active compared to some of the other ones on this list. Then we have Say, which has a bit more higher transfer cost than Core, but once again, in the swap cost is a lot more lower, or not more, like a 10% lower, 20% lower. Then we have Ronin, another interesting EVM fork, has very, very affordable transfer costs, and swap costs are pretty low on compared to Say as well. Then we have Polygon, which also used to be very cheap in the beginning, then it became more expensive, and now it has become a lot more cheaper again. But in terms of the Polygon's own price, it has gone a lot more down, which has made it basically a lot more cheaper to use. Then at number 8, we have Kaya, previously known as Clayton. This is basically a Korean EVM blockchain by KakaoTalk. A very affordable numbers here. Then below them at 7 we have Cadena, which is slightly expensive on the transfers, but it's almost twice as lower in swap costs, so that's pretty crazy. Then we have Hedera, another very affordable actions here once again in terms of both transfers and swaps. And below it, very slightly, is Algorand, which has a bit of a different structure when it comes to their how they count the transactions, so it's maybe not as valid of an argument, because there's like when you do a swap, there's like 4 different transactions that happen there in the mix, and it needs to be kind of said that all of these chains kind of measure transactions on a different way. Like Solana is measuring signed messages as transactions, which would not be normally classified by EVM chains or Bitcoin, for example, as transactions. So it's kind of hard to measure these sometimes. Then at number 4, we have Optimism, which is basically number 1 EVM chain, and Optimism stack based chain on this list has very, very low transfer cost, and the swap costs are also quite significantly low. Then let's finally get into top 3. Osmosis, another very affordable chain to use. Obviously, Osmosis price is very low right now, and they are barely up that 100k transactions per day. That is a very important caveat here, that they are like almost didn't make it to this video because they really didn't meet those activity numbers. So that's a very important thing here. Then we have Berachain, which technically I shouldn't have included on this list because they're very, very new. I don't actually think that they met the 3 months. I'm kind of, forgetting the months over here, but hey, I decided to add it here on this list and see. And let's get a bit of a drum roll for number 1. So a lot of people probably didn't expect it to be Gnosis, but logically, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, as they are using the DAI stablecoin as their gas fee token. So whatever it's the bull cycle or the bear cycle, DAI is staying $1. At some rare occasions go to 99 cents or 97 cents if there's a hack, and sometimes to $1.01, but mostly at $1. So the gas fees are going to be relatively staying the same throughout the whole cycle. It might even go lower if there's lower activity, obviously, but this is the wisdom of this model, which should be used by a lot of other chains, because when it comes to Ethereum, AVAX, Sui, Aptos, or Near, their prices are going up, so that will also artificially increase the price of the gas fee in terms of dollars. So this model basically allows to gas fee kind of stay relatively low, and obviously they have a good stack behind them because they're able to give so significantly lower transaction costs compared to the other EVM chains out there. But that's basically my research, what I have to share with you guys. Maybe you now decided to maybe build your project on a different chain now that you have this information. Obviously, numbers change, technologies get improvements, there might be changes on the chain which increase or decrease gas fees, and there might be also like activity drops on certain chains, and there might be more fraction in the future or more consolidation. A lot of things can happen, and so will statistics. And obviously, if I would have conducted these stats on another day, well, there would have been a bit different numbers based on the activity on certain chains. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more by subscribing and like the channel, and let me know what you think is your best chain for cheap and affordable transactions, or what you're doing.